a show that tackles the big issues affecting the BVI and the rest of the Caribbean. Searches for answers to today's big questions and gives viewers a unique perspective on developing stories. Follow the big story with me, Kathy Richards, only on GTV. This show is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, Cyril B. Romney Turtola Pier Park, NV Salon, Nail Spa and Barbershop, Tisley Cross Deliciously Smooth Cider, and Digicel, simply more speed, reliability and entertainment. This is The Big Story. I'm Kathy Richards. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this edition. In studio with me is no stranger to the set, Mr. Carvin Malone. It's a pleasure having you as always. I don't know what happened today, but probably our minds were, you were thinking of me and I was thinking of you. You thinking that you got to come to The Big Story, and I'm thinking that, you know, my first recording for the day is you.
Yes.
And our hands went on the same colors in our closet this morning.
Well, green is not a bad color, is it?
It's not. It actually looks good on me.
Yes, no, I must say, and I will actually attest to that. Happy to be here once again, and I think that, you know, it's a series. You can almost call this a series.
Oh, yes.
Of interviews that we've had, and we're just about close. So as we go into it, I'll explain why this is important for us to get it right.
Okay, well, we end up with a continuation of the series when I would have read where the topic of beneficial ownership was played down in the European environment, where and knowing the fact that this is something that has been highly recommended and being pushed on the people of the Virgin Islands, more so the government and the certain senior officials when it comes to a register of beneficial ownership. And we had the governor who would have made a statement on this in his report, citing that this was not accomplished in the way that he would have expected it to have been.
Yes.
Let's have that discussion. You are the one who fleshes out these things more
right.
deeply than I am able to. So I'll let you lead us in on this and on what has happened there in the European space.
Well, as we're aware that we have, well, most of the territories, overseas territories, have pledged that the open registry would be made into effect come 21st of December when that becomes a world standard. So there's still some maneuvering in the middle of this. But there was a recent pronouncement by the European community that in a court that it is improper, not right, unjust for people's private business to be just wide open to the public without cause. There is no hold back in terms of if a court or if there are any reasons written that this information will not be made public. But the requirement to have it basically put on national TV and or put on the internet, as some people will tend to do after they receive the information, was not proper. So this was handed down, and this then we awaited or awaiting the actual interpretation from the folks here who are responsible, FSC, who are responsible for this, to see, well, what effects it might have. Only to be introduced yesterday, I think it was, that there was a standing committee in the House of Commons, in the Parliament, that stated that not only do they wish to not look or consider what the European community is doing, but they would love if the requirement for open books, open registry, be moved forward 6 months to the end of June. And when you read the discourse that it gave, in fact, when I went to the vote, fortunately it was defeated, but all of the Labour Party members voted to have it open 6 months earlier, and all of the, well, it was the Labour and the Scottish Party, two members there, and all of the Conservatives had voted to keep the particular December deadline. Now, this is important in that there is an acknowledgement that the rest of the world have not gone this way. The rest of the world will not go this way. So the overseas territories and the crown dependencies, they're calling on them also to basically have this done as a test, a global test, as to exactly what effects it would have. And I think it's unfair. I think it's not wise to do, but they will have it no other way. And one of the telling stories in the conversations that was printed, and I'll actually share it with you, is that they reckoned as an argument for moving it forward. One of the MPs noted quite eloquently, maybe distastefully,
and I'm going to ask you said eloquently.
Yes, distastefully, the fact that one of the resounding reasons for moving it forward is this 950-page COI report, as he stated, that is coming out of the Virgin Islands. And if you don't put a rein on this now, they say, that this will all lend to greater atrocities, so to speak. So we'll get into that some more, but I think it's quite unfortunate.
Yeah, but and that's why I spoke about this COI, because somehow it seems to lend towards that particular target.
Yes.
And more on the local field, apart from the general register, the push to have public officials declare. There seems to be some synergy between the two.
Well, earlier, because on the eve of the release of the report, or the events of April 28, the governor local had decided that it had nothing to do with him releasing the report at that particular time. Meanwhile, back at the ranch,
back in the ranch, from the woods down to the ranch.
Yes. Meanwhile, if you remember, the Foreign Secretary had stated that the arrest, the events of the 28th, give just reason why the COI exercise had to be conducted. And so there was a disunity, something to be reconciled. But I had no doubt that it is exactly what is the feeling that they would actually do this. And when because, the challenge I have is that a number of folks here in the Virgin Islands will not, NOT, take time to read the tenets of that report. It has about 15 to 18 statements which I would like to be contested. Because it gave aspersion on our leaders from 1950 straight up, not having the ability to do it right, deliberately doing it wrong, elected officials. And I think that it is not right. I think, and this is why I will continue to push for the release of the Cox report, because some of the deficiencies in there, yes, we have issues that we must correct as a people. But to tell me, and yesterday we celebrated the Great March, yes? And to tell me that none of our leaders from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s got it right is not fair, is not right, is not proper. And we must not let history see only the one side of this report. This report is incomplete without a counter in terms of the Cox report, in terms of what it is we will do it. And I think that when we get into the constitutional review, we'll see where it was all in train in terms of you do this first, we do this second, we do this third. And unfortunately, I'm not getting the population in any meaningful numbers sensitized to the fact that when the public consultation period is done with the constitutional review, then, like that old song, that old biblical song, well, it's a hymn, it is finished. I've been tracing this since 2015, and to see it play out the way that it is not suiting for me.
Well, I trust that we somehow be able to meet the masses, whether they agree with your interpretations or your findings or not. It is very important that we all sit and study and understand what's going on. But I want to bring you back to the need for you to have the Cox report.
Yes.
I seem to be pulling from you that you are very, very confident that what you'll find in that Cox report, should it be made public, is something totally different or vastly different from what are the findings of the CIA report. What if it is not different?
Well, the whole thing is this, right? That if we're going to get it right, because I've always contended that the COI report should have been best term a review of governance of the Virgin Islands for the past 72 years, if not 55, either from 50 straight up or from 67 straight up when ministerial government was instituted. Now, what I'm saying about the Cox report is that the whole administration for the civil service, the permanent officials, those folks who have to, quote unquote, I am a new minister coming in 2019. We have public officials working since 25 years, some 40 years, some 25 years, who are empowered to make sure that the government business continue, who are empowered as accounts officer to make sure that certain things are done. These are under the administration of the governor and one of his 5 special duties, together with the justice system, the police department, together with the courts, together with the registrars, together with the particular prison, save for the administration of it. And if you're not going to do an in-depth analysis of any of these 5 special responsibilities, you are missing a big part of what we will need to get right in order for it to move forward in any meaningful way.
So having not gone in that direction to have in-depthly investigated or look at these other core areas, are we suggesting that there was a specific agenda?
Well, I'm not actually suggesting. I told you from the very beginning, from in January 2021, is a done deal report waiting for a few interviews. This is why they slated it for 6 months. You could not do that in 6 months, not with the broad, non-specific heading that you have, just like the charges they're bringing against public officials today. There are no specific charges: breach of public confidence, breach of fiduciary particular thing. You know, you can charge me and you on that tomorrow for candy. You know, and so there's no specific charges as far as I am concerned when you go broad like that. And just so to the COI report, it was a done deal report from the very beginning. It was a cookie cutter report from Turks and Caicos, from all of the other areas that they have had. The BVI was going to be the last particular standing areas. COI was conducted in Turks and Caicos. They suspended the Constitution. They put into the Constitution all of what they reckoned that needed to be there. The particular, in Anguilla, the Ministry of Finance has been moved over to the UK, so it's a UK appointee and so forth. In Montserrat, because of the volcano and what have you, well, they're on grant in aid mainly. In actually Bermuda, they had a particular airport project. They had a COI, a specific COI on an airport project, I think it was, and there were some charges laid. But the BVI was the one that was going to be most difficult, and here we are. Here we are, 2 years later, and we have this particular eventuality coming forward. 444 days to complete a report that was scheduled to be released within a 60-day period after they received it in early April. It was released 24 hours after the April 28th event. A government change within 5 days. They gave that government 30 days to accept all other recommendations, save none. they went to the Privy Council and to the Parliament and issued an order in council, which is reserved only for the governor's own discretion. If all of the events that they have put in does not come to pass, they stopped the Constitution Review Terms of Reference that was already passed, and they inserted 10 items coming directly from the Constitution Review process, together with recommendations on how they should be answered. So here you have...
Together with recommendations as how they should be answered.
Well, and if you were to go through it, you would see that the recommendations from B1 to B49, and within the 950 pages, there were reasonings for each of these, as per the Cox report, without the benefit of a counter. There's no one that gets tried without a defense. No one should be tried without some form of, let's see the alternative. What you have gathered from the facts, is this what everyone has? You will never know it if the Cox report does not come out. I'm not saying it is a get-free card. I'm saying let's listen to what the other report says. And so forth, right? So you have 30 days, you have all of these particular events, and unilaterally have an order in council, carried to the Privy Council, carried to the Parliament, given to the governor to enforce, and now we have 16 members of the public going around the territory as if they can then have a final say in terms of what is recommended for the Constitution. Well, what about what we had? That was unilaterally. That was not done based on a 16-person recommendation. That was based on the particular deliberate judgment of the UK by themselves, without our input. And I'm saying we are about to do a constitutional review with this document over our head. We are about to go into election with this document over our head. And how could this be fair? How could this be just? How could this be correct?
And I would have asked you this question in previous interview, and I'll ask you it again. What would it take for us to get that Cox report?
Well, I'm going to see the Freedom of Information. Well, that is in the UK, isn't it? But I'm saying is that at the end of the day, the particular premier had said that it would take $1 million in order to complete the payment for it. I resent the fact that we should be paying another $1 million on top of the 8 that was expended. Not all to Withers, but expended for this particular report. The most of it that went to Withers, right? Because all during the process, it was understood that a report was being developed for delivery. So if you have to pay another $250,000, yes, even up to another 500, but surely not $1 million. So I would think that if enough pressures, because the premier has to stand up and demand it. I am thinking that without his demanding it, it would not happen.
Does it take the premier to demand it, or does it take the legislator, the legislative house?
Well, I think this is very important for us to do, and you're correct. We're going through the budget process right now, so it could be one of the items that that is adjusted for. Because I'm sure it's not in there, but I think it's one of the items that could be adjusted for in terms of making sure that if this is going to be part of our history, come 50 years from now and we celebrating whatever was done, or are we remembering what was done in 2022? We must also remember that this legislature passed the monies to have the report so that we have a complete story. It must not be history that we sat and did nothing in order to look at it. Because I don't, as I told, I think I told one person before, why should the next generation be subjected to the kind of, to us, if we had erred, if there are matters to be corrected based on yesteryear or this year, Why should the other generation not have an opportunity to thrive as opposed to being subservient, an area of servitude because of the sins of others immediately prior?
I want to take your direct you now to in more depth the constitutional review process as is. How do you see it going right now?
Well, while the numbers are building, I am not convinced that we have enough people, of our people, engaging the level of engagement that is required so that we can then get all of the processes done. I think, and I'll say it without reservation, we did ourselves a disservice by not including in the main terms of reference those items that, in my view, the people of the Virgin Islands would wish to have explored.
Those are?
Okay, fine. Well, what I've said here is that you have a situation where the particular terms of reference that is being explained to the people every time that they go to a meeting, they would explain the 15 terms of reference, 10 of which emanated or were gathered from the Commission of Inquiry. And all of the other areas, you will have to bring it up yourself. If we had put it in the main terms of reference, they would have had to be, quote unquote, named out at the same time that the others are. So whose constitution is it? Is it just a matter of it? So I've looked in terms of getting a number of responses, which I would try to get 2 programs, 2 hours each, so that we can then go through each of these terms so that we can have the people understanding. And a no vote is a vote. You either agree or you don't agree, but be informed is all that we could ask. So on the issue of referendums, for instance, the narrative that leads each of these is this: the people of the Virgin Islands do not trust governance of our people by our people, and therefore are demanding measures that can be enshrined in the new constitution to give the greatest assurance that transparency, accountability, and good governance can be practiced and monitored with consequences for non-adherence. Referendums, recall, and term limits are 3 powers reserved to enable the voters by petition to propose or repeal legislations or to remove an elected official from office. And under the concept of referendum, a referendum is a question, issue, or an act referred to a vote of the people by the House of Assembly, or a petition from voters as authorized by law. Notwithstanding the existence of a referendum act on the Book of the Virgin Islands, I recommend that provisions for referenda should be examined with a view of establishing specific guidelines that would be embodied or embedded in the Constitution. So referendum is one. The second one with the same preamble, but it deals with recall. Recall is where the electorate in an area can trigger a special election to remove an elected representative before the end of the term. Conditions to trigger the recall could include if they're convicted in the territory or convicted of an offense and sentenced or ordered to be imprisoned or detained after all appeals have been exhausted. We will note that a sentence of more than 12 months in jail automatically disqualify, and even in our Constitution, disqualify persons from being a representative.
Yeah.
It could also include suspension from the House following report or recommended sanction from the Committee of Standards for a specific period, say for 10 days or 14 days if the sittings are not specified. And it could include being convicted of an offense under the parliamentary standards, so that at the end of the day, the sentence does not have to be a custodial for this condition. If one of the conditions is met, the Speaker of the House must notify the local returning officer. They are known as a petition officer when dealing with a repeal provision. So the recall is one. And the last of those three would be the one in terms of term limits. Term limits ensure greater fiscal responsibility and accountability. The longer politicians stay in office, the more of the tax dollars they want to spend. Term limits reduce corruption and open our government to new people with new ideas to solve our country's problems or issues, promote them or solve them. Conversely, term limits are viewed as non-democratic in some areas. It punishes experience and it reduces familiarity with constituents. So there's a debate to be had.
Yeah.
But a debate that must be had.
Yeah.
So I recommend
institutional memory
That's
is very key in scenarios like this.
Yes.
And also with the previous one, the number 2 that you mentioned, I'm gathering this one was coined following what we are now calling the activities of April 28th.
Well, it's funny enough that this particular provision was lifted directly from the House of Commons library.
Oh, okay.
And funny enough, this particular piece was done on October 21st, 2022. So what I've done in this particular discourse, and I've mailed it to you, I have looked at the source documents for each of these so that you can have proper reference, because it is not someone going to sleep at night having a dream and then coming and saying, well, I have a degree of brilliance. It is based on research. I pride myself in being informed by reading, and by so doing you can then see the other one that deals with referendum. That was a referendum. It again comes from the House of Commons briefing papers,
Okay.
established on August 31st, 2016.
Okay.
So, so you have all of these that we must be able to look in terms of the research. So I'm prepared to do the research. The nation is paying me anyhow. So I have taken this as a just cause so that we can educate the public as to exactly whatever they need to be informed. I'm not here to make up anyone's mind, to be informed.
Just to be informed, and then you make a choice, a decision as to where you want to go or where you want to work with.
There are two areas, because no time is of essence
Yes,
for you.
yes.
The two areas, one of them states that a timetable for a referendum to be conducted to decide on the form of political advancements required by the population, inclusive of becoming a unitary, sovereign, democratic state, with His Majesty or the monarchy to remain as head of state. Now, when you look at this, the research paper that I've referenced here is the United Nations Chapter 154, Section 73, the Self-Governing Report by Dr. Carvin, and the Bermuda Economic Paper on the Economic Consequences of Political Independence. There was also a study done by Mr. Whitley, Doug Whitley. The draft of it was handed, I now learned about 2 or 3 days ago, to the previous Premier Smith, but never saw the light of day. I think that should be one of the resource documents that we have, so we can look at this in earnest. And I have here that the steps and procedures required in preparation for advanced and progressive self-determination are as follows. 1, education on the political, economic, and social benefits and consequences of political advancement of any form. 2, the conduct of a referendum by voters of the territory. 3, the actual voting day for that referendum. 4, preparation for the transition, and 5, the actual transition and actualization. Whether it's associated states, whether it's by actually joining in a formation, whether it's by independence, and whether it is going straight into becoming a republic. Okay. It's a conversation that needs to be had. So that we can then come and we can actually do this. And I mentioned that there were 2, but let me just mention just one more, as I said. Anegada and Jocelyn Dyke.
That.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Declaration of Anegada and Jocelyn Dyke as districts 10 and 11, respectively. But I must add one more after this. Respectively, thereby electing their own representatives. The source document. If you look through the 2007 Virgin Islands Constitution Order, there's a section dealing with the cabinet, and I would urge people to read paragraph 47.2 as one of the reference. Another paragraph, 63.2 through 63.4. Another paragraph, 71, the powers to make laws. And if you look through the 2005 Constitution Review Commission report, issue number 4 deals extensively with the 6th ministerial post on pages 33 and 34. This is not a new conversation. So my recommendation that the provisions be made for Anegada and Jocelyn Dyke to be declared as districts 10 and 11 respectively, either in conformity with the 2007 Virgin Islands Constitution Order number 47.2 or by reduction of the at-large constituencies as I had cited before. Okay. There's provision for it by increasing the House of the House of Assembly, or if you don't want to increase it, then cut the number of at-large to 2, and you will keep the same proportion. But you can give the people of Anegada and Jocelyn Dyke what they have longed for. And I am not accepting the concept that the population is too small for them to have this. I'm not accepting it.
Okay.
And who want to fight it, who want to promote it, can promote it, but I am not accepting it.
I know you wanted to push one more,
yes,
but I want to leave that one for when we as a starting point for when we come back, because definitely you're on the clock here. I would have loved to give you a few seconds to make that appeal to our constitution. Your constituents to attend and participate in the constitutional review. 10 seconds for that one.
I will ask that every citizen, every Virgin Islander, every belonger, everyone who called the Virgin Islands their home, participate in this constitutional review commission work that we have. It is critical that we do, because the next one may not welcome before 15, 20 years. But what is required now will help the other generation to have a BVI that they too can be proud of.
Honorable Malone, as always, I want to thank you so much for being our guest here on The Big Story. And like you said, this is a series, and we will continue as promised. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this edition of The Big Story. I'm Kathy Richards.
We know that where you choose to bank matters, and it is your vote on what your funds do in strengthening our community. As your official Bank of Paradise, we invest and support the lifeblood of our economy by helping in the realization of personal goals for homeownership, education, and entrepreneurial visions, which support small businesses. We make it our place to connect with persons and worthy causes, and we have been doing so for more than 30 years. Where your money goes and what your dollars empower are your choice. And we thank you for choosing us. a bank that gives where it matters the most, for you, for our community, and a happier tomorrow. The National Bank of the Virgin Islands.